Before we start, I think it'd be a good idea for you to just go over who you are for people that don't know you and what your
Mhm.
coaching program is all about. So if you want to jump into that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, my name is Darko. People are probably most familiar with my work through Instagram, where my handle is Warboss AOC. AOC is obviously from my company, which is Anabolic Outlaw Coaching. It's kind of a it started off as a regular coaching service which I offer to my clients, basically who want to change their body composition, get bigger, stronger, lose body weight and stuff like that. But it also kind of I wouldn't want to say shifted directions, but it definitely got a life of its own, to the point where I talk about a lot of things which I believe are as important as basically changing your body for the better. So my whole shtick, as I can imagine, is centered around strength. So it's mental strength, emotional strength, emotional sophistication, and also generally the uplifting of the self. So in every possible way that you can imagine it.
Did you, as you started training, let's take it back to Warboss before you ever started training.
Mhm.
Did you develop all of those deeper philosophies building up your body? How did that work? Did you already kind of were you already instilled with a lot of those philosophies, or did they come as you developed yourself physically?
Well, I believe that the person that I am now was definitely the foundation for that individual was basically laid down much before I actually stepped inside of a gym. I had certain things that interested me that later on I realized made a lot of sense when they work together. For instance, some of my earliest memories were that I really liked history. I was always into it. I didn't know what attracted me to it, but I always liked medieval history. I liked the Hellenic period. I liked the ancient period, so basically Roman Empire, stuff like that, medieval times. That's something that I always liked. Then it kind of shifted into music. So for the, I mean, still up to this day, I'm heavily, I wouldn't want to say involved in the sense that I produce music, but I'm heavily involved in the music that I like to listen to. So for the people who are unfamiliar, it's mainly aggressive music. So heavy metal, specifically black metal. So it's kind of like as I got older, a lot of things naturally fell into place. They all made sense together. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, something just came up. Okay, so basically, from the history to the music to everything like that, it all moved in the same direction, and then it's like a puzzle, and then it eventually just all clicks together. So that's kind of eventually how it happened to me. I think I had a certain outlook on life before I even knew that I had it. There were just some things that I naturally was more inclined to like, and some things which I was actually more inclined to dislike. So again, when I started training, I think all of that, as I forged a shape for myself, I think also I shaped all of that into basically one structure.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes total sense. Another thing I wanted to bring up is a lot of these you're way more unique than most fitness influencers, if you want to use that term. um I especially notice it in your writing. Were you always drawn to writing? Your writing is very entertaining and it dives into a lot of cool ideas. Have you always been a good writer? When did you start developing that skill?
I think it would be a bit how should I say, um, not selfish, but I think it would be kind of out there to say for myself that I'm a good writer. I've gained compliments about my writing, and people like it because it's a bit different than the popular live,
Yeah.
laugh, laugh
Yeah.
movement, which I was never really about. Was I always into writing? No. A lot of people might find this as a surprise, but I've only started reading significantly up until a couple of years ago. I was always reading, don't get me wrong. I was always researching, either reading articles or getting myself familiar in certain aspects. But I was never really an avid reader up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago, because I'm kind of a person who likes to always do things. I always like to be occupied with a lot of different things. So reading for me, even up to this day, it doesn't really make sense from the stance of my own personality, because I like to be active. And for me, reading, also one of the reasons why I don't watch that many movies, requires that you basically sit down, be devoted to an activity that isn't super exciting for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you cannot multitask. You have to be devoted to it 100%. So, but then once I actually realized how much I needed it and how much it's actually benefiting my life, the same way like weightlifting. I always kind of, to shift onto another subject, I always tell people that when you get stronger and lose weight and build muscle, everything is going to get better. And people are kind of like don't really believe me in the very beginning, because like, oh, how can my emotional state get better? How can my financial state get better? How can my relationship with people get better? And I would tell, it will get better. Trust me, it will. All of those things work together. And kind of the reading and kind of researching and did the same thing in a different aspect. As for the writing itself, I think it would be a very it wouldn't do justice if I didn't mention who heavily inspired me to write, and that would be obviously the person who I hope most people are familiar with, and that is Paul Wagoner. He is now the head guy in charge of Power Aesthetic. He was obviously the most familiar with Operation Werewolf. And he had a very raw, very gritty presentation that wasn't sugar-coated. It wasn't complex for the sake of complexity, if that makes sense. That I feel like a lot of people are trying to do now. One of the things that really influenced me by looking at his writing was the fact that he made such complex subjects relatable. He has a very very specific skill to make these like super deep topics very ordinary. So that's kind of why I liked him. And and kind of how, and I basically just started writing my own thoughts and how I think about things, obviously with a heavy influence from him, but also developing my own voice, so to say, how I structure things. So I think that is basically how it all started.
And I like how you say his writing, people that are really good writers, they don't need to make things unnecessarily complex. Even the best songs in the world, if everybody just tried to play the most complex riff or whatever, it wouldn't sound good, right? People who are really good writers, they can present an idea in a very simple, relatable way without having to add unnecessary words or just trying to sound intellectual. Your writing comes off very genuine, and it cuts right through all the bullshit, which is something that a lot of people, our culture loves to sprinkle in a lot of fluff, but this kind of stuff is just raw and real. One thing I wanted to ask you, when I read your stuff, it comes off as very positive. It comes off as uplifting because my mindset is in that space. But a lot of people nowadays would look to your writing and be like, oh, he's fat shaming, or he's being negative about this. Have you
Because I am.
Yeah, but that's but that's the thing. It's like, to me, you come off as uplifting and motivational, but have you got a lot of pushback and people been mad about what you write or anything like that?
Very little, because I think thankfully a lot of people have that basic emotional and not emotional, but social intelligence, to the point where if you don't like something, you're just going to move away from it. So you're not really going to have the need to say, oh, this is horrible. So no, I didn't have that much opposition. And I think everyone who is genuine with himself and like has basic honesty is going to realize, hey, I think he has a point. I mean, I'm not saying anything. If you look at my writing, if you look at even your stuff I love. I have to turn back and give praise to your latest post about
Yeah.
the fit passport.
Yeah.
That's the only passport that I would actually install. But no, but if we what we're suggesting, what we're talking about is nothing radical. If you actually take out the emotional aspect people
Well,
have from
it shouldn't be radical,
yeah,
but
exactly.
it is today. That's the thing.
Yeah, it is. So, but I think people who have, again, basic social intelligence will realize, hey, what he is suggesting and what he is saying actually makes sense, because you can play pretend to a point where that isn't affecting your life. But if you are 340 pounds fat and you have almost a heart attack at the age of 29, and your doctor tells you, hey, listen, you have to lose 150 to 200 pounds to stay alive, at that point you're not looking for justification why your ideological view is correct compared to the next guy. You're just basically now looking for bare survival, and at that point the things that make sense actually come to fruition. It's kind of like one of the things that I mentioned, because for the people who do not know me or do not follow my work or basically are not really familiar with that, I am from Serbia. So not Siberia, as some people tend to misplace it. I'm from Serbia, so that's in Europe, Eastern Europe. And one thing that Serbia was infamous for, I would want to say famous, but it's in reality it's infamous for, is the wars in the 90s. So obviously that was a catastrophic conflict. The repercussions of that we face up to this day. Let's no need to sugarcoat it. But one thing that I'm always, people sometimes like about it and sometimes really hate about it, is the fact that I'm super critical about Western societal problems. When your life is in danger, when you're facing real problems, in the sense of there is a potential chance that my town gets bombed. I think most people they never woke up with that idea. Potentially your school could be bombed tomorrow. And at that point, when you're facing real problems, will you have food tomorrow? When you will your close friends and family stay alive? At that point, you kind of don't have the time to make up problems. And that's what I feel like what is happening in most of Western society, Western Europe, Central America, North America, stuff like that. I feel like we're kind of those regions are kind of at the loss of real problems. So now they have to make their own lives a bit more interesting by creating artificial ones. But where you can always pull back when things get a bit dicey, and you're like, oh, okay, we weren't doing that. I mean, a perfect example was the COVID situation in the beginning of last year. If we now, obviously, we kind of all know how the situation transpired and what actually became of it. But January, February, March of 2020, no one knew what was going on. I mean, let's be real. Most of us thought it's like a very, very bad epidemic is coming.
Yeah.
We were watching those videos of people in China dropping dead in the middle of the street. So we were like, okay, things are getting rough. And you can see all of a sudden, all of those the social programming, the utter garbage that gets fed on a daily basis of like everything that makes sense, the kind of thing which we spoke about, the things that we say that shouldn't be radical, but for some reason are, all of a sudden that gets dropped real quick when real problems arise. I mean, when the entire COVID situation came, all of a sudden gender exists. All of a sudden we should have masculinity is very important. It's a very important thing to have a moral viewpoint, have a moral compass. It's all of a sudden strength is important. All of a sudden financial stability is important, because of course it is. We've been and this is something to bring up another guy. I don't know if I actually read that from him or I heard it from a podcast or something like that, or he actually told me in person. I completely forgot. But Jack Donovan, if the people are familiar with his work, obviously, and a great author and a great individual all around. But he kind of said something really interesting a while back, and that is that the reason why we are popular is not because we say something new and revolutionary, but something that we say is old and proven.
Mhm.
So it inevitably it falls back to that.
You said something interesting that kind of got the gears turning. You said people lack real problems in Western society, so they create their own problems. They fabricate situations they need to overcome. They fabricate oppression. But there's nothing wrong necessarily with creating resistance in your life, but what's going on is it's a very negative, self-defeating, fabricated problem, when on the other hand you could go to the gym and create that resistance. Absolutely. I'm not in a war-torn country. I don't have to worry about food. My money's okay, like everything's going well. I'm in a peaceful situation. But when I fucking go to the gym, I put myself through hell. I work out fucking hard. I intentionally create adversity in my life. And I'm curious, what do you think about that? How people are creating these problems, but how do we take the negative creations to the positive?
One of the individuals that heavily influenced me from day one to, I think, and he's probably still does, obviously not in that capacity, because now my identity, I'm obviously a little bit older and I have an identity already formed, but it was Jim Wendler. So for the people who are unfamiliar, Jim Wendler is a guy who wrote 531. Now, outside of writing a really good program, Jim is a really interesting guy. First of all, from the physical appearance, he's like bald, jacked, big beard, tattooed, listens to death metal. So really interesting individual from that perspective. But also, one of the things that he said is very similar to what you mentioned. He said, like, we're not at war. We are not fighting for survival. We have food on our table, but by training, by inflicting this self-induced adversity, we basically give thanks to the people who did that before us, so that we have the privilege, because this is very important. Training is a privilege, the privilege to do a fraction of what they did. So to come back to your original question, I think, as you mentioned, this self-induced adversity, first of all, it's normal. Because in a stable environment, people like challenges. Even in a not so stable environment, people like challenges because people like to overcome them, and that's basic human physiology. You encounter a problem, you fix it, your body releases dopamine, you feel good. Now you want to do another thing. Basic human involvement. Mm-hmm. The problem is how you structure that adversity, and how do you act upon it. A perfect example, a perfect way of structuring adversity is making your life just a little bit harder for something that will eventually be beneficial in the long run. Mm-hmm. That can be obvious, as what we mentioned, going to the gym because you obviously need it. Generally speaking, if we look at society now, and I mean, this might rub some people in the wrong way, but you don't need a 500-pound deadlift to live in North America. You don't need a 500-pound deadlift for no reason. Sure, you want to be healthy, that's obviously fine, but we can always go in the direction of, well, if you're chasing a 500-pound deadlift, are you really conscious about health? But the reason why I say this is you don't need a 500-pound deadlift, but you're still going to aim for it, because it's almost like a form of resistance to actually what is going on everywhere outside. Because if everyone is atrophying and everyone is decaying physically, the best resistance that you can do, the best revolt against that, is by uplifting yourself physically. So you don't need to do it, but you still do it. it's kind of like a lot of those things. You don't need to wake up super early in the morning because maybe you don't need to. Maybe you can work from home, but you still do it because maybe a time will come when you will need a 500-pound deadlift. Maybe you will need the basic discipline that has been drilled in the back of your head for years because of something as simple as waking up 3 hours before you should have, or maybe having that basic financial stability, maybe saving money, maybe doing things which are difficult that you, generally speaking, don't need to survive and live in today's society, but you still do it. I think that is important. As you mentioned, people are trying to create that natural reaction and natural habitat of basically creating problems in a very negative way. The entire body positivity movement, or the way I like to call it body negativity, because there is nothing positive about it. The entire idea that the world is against you, trying to be at war with biology and basic human physiology, that's a losing game. So I think definitely you can structure it in a good way. Another perfect example is martial arts, because you're gonna be hit, you're gonna be in pain, you're gonna be fighting another human. Hopefully, you're gonna be fighting or at least sparring in a sensible fashion. You're not gonna try to break each other's skulls, but that's in a society where violence is deemed so inappropriate and unnecessary. Sometimes you really need to do that because maybe you're going to come to a point where violence is going to become the only solution, and you don't want to be the individual that doesn't have the capacity to do that when things go really bad.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said there. You can just look at the outcomes. You create adversity by going to the gym. That's a struggle. But what does that lead to down the line? Now you can talk about, oh, the world's fat shaming me, and that's your adversity. But what does that lead to? If you live that life, that leads to a negative outcome. That leads to death. That leads to disease. That's all you have to do. You just have to think about, and even if the world, of course, the world is transpiring to kill you. Jordan Peterson talks about that. We're all going to die. Life isn't fair. Who gives a fuck? Deal with it. Move on. Do something with your life. It's like we're just wallowing in this victimhood and negativity, and it's getting to the point where, even I thought of something today. You brought up that post I made yesterday. I didn't think it kind of went viral a little bit. Like, a lot of people were sharing it. It got a lot of likes, and I was like, wow, like, okay, I'm not the only one thinking this shit. And obviously the people that follow me, are going to be biased towards the way I think, but they were sharing it. I got a bunch of people that were sharing it that were way outside of the realm that I'm used to. But I also posted it on my personal Facebook account with people that know me personally. Like, in I put my real last name on there, and I got a bunch of negativity. People were saying stuff like, well, heart disease, living unhealthy or being healthy is a choice, and blah, 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 and saying all this shit. And I'm like,
so is being unhealthy.
And I'm trying to internalize this and think about it, because I don't want to be so biased that I can't think about their side. And I thought to myself, this is the thought that came to me while I was in the gym this morning. The people who treated their bodies like garbage, who were body positive, they're obese, they never took responsibility for their health, suddenly prioritize their health when it becomes everyone else's responsibility. And I'm like, dude, that is it right there. No one wants to own their shit. It's always someone else's problem. The unvaccinated it's always a scapegoat. There's always an external problem, but it's like, yo, you're the fucking problem. Fix yourself first. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
It's kind of like I actually commented on it. First of all, the entire COVID situation, honestly, I got sick of it, and I don't really talk.
I don't want to fucking talk about it anymore.
Oh, that's a good metaphor. I got sick of COVID, sick of COVID
Yeah.
talk. But I had COVID. I had it November of last year. perfectly fine. Obviously, I didn't expect anything better was going to come to me, but obviously it affected some people really bad.
Mhm.
Now, it's kind of like the thing that you mentioned, the scapegoat. I mentioned this somewhat recently, and that is, I told people that if they were worried as much as how much people are wearing masks, if how much people are getting vaccinated, if they invested a fraction of that energy into worrying about what they're eating, how they're spending their day physically, if their habits, we wouldn't have had a pandemic. Like, we wouldn't, because we this is not some bias or false interpretation of COVID. No, it generally kills people who are either have diabetes, hypertension, who are completely obese. Though that's like 80% of the people that got killed. Now, obviously, there is 5% of the people who, for some reason, are at random, but that's with every disease. I mean, as you mentioned, heart disease. How many people know of the amount of young people that die, especially athletes, out of complete heart failure, that they don't know the reason for it? I mean, this happens probably every couple of months. If you watch the news, a basketball player, a football player, or something like that, he just drops dead because he had an underlying condition with his heart, and no one knew that, and he was a completely normal functioning athlete and young person, and he went all the tests, but somehow this went undetected. But now, are we going to shut professional sports because there is a 1% chance that a healthy young person might die from it? Well, no. I mean, it's common sense. So I conclude with you. There is always going to be a scapegoat because people don't want to take personal responsibility. And I am going to repeat it again. If I don't know what's the percentage, but I was, when the entire COVID craze happened, I was shocked by the amount of people who had diabetes. I wasn't genuinely familiar with the scope.
What is it? I can't remember what it is in Canada, but it's quite high.
It's a ridiculous number. I mean, when I was younger, I thought diabetes was an STD, something like you get and you die in like in like 3 years. But seriously, I mean, it's ridiculous to think of the idea that, I don't know, 1/8 of the population has diabetes, if not even higher. That's a modern man's disease. Obviously, diabetes exists in the past, but I mean, unless we're talking about the genetic defects that get born with it, it's a lifestyle induced disease. It's a very comedic almost. It's almost a comedic expression of our lives that we're literally being killed by being slobs. I don't view myself as Christian, but I mean, gluttony is one of the sins. So it's kind of amazing that we're literally being killed by gluttony. The excess of food, the excess of pleasure, the excess of everything, and then just something comes and then just rams half of the population.
I was watching this documentary, and I can't remember where it was. I'm gonna say it was in Thailand, and there was these monkeys there that the tourists would hang out with. They all there's tons of them. They'd all kind of huddle up by this temple, and tourists would go there and they'd play with the tourists, and the monkeys were very used to the people. And I'm bringing this up for a point you'll see here in a sec. They would have juice boxes and candy bars, and they'd feed it to the monkeys. And what they're having a problem with obese monkeys now, because they're eating human food. And you'll see this giant obese monkey on the sidewalk, all slouched over. And I'm thinking to myself, you would never see an obese monkey in the wild. If they never came into contact with humans, they would have never been obese. And now, just because they're eating human food and they're developing habits similar to humans, only human beings can fuck themselves up that bad. It's so interesting. In nature, it would have never been, it's never would have been that way. And yeah, we're designed to want sugar because that's survival mechanism. There's all these things we need to control because we live in this culture where everything is in abundance. I can eat whenever the fuck I want to eat. But when that goes unchecked, it leads to catastrophic outcomes.
It's just it's kind of like the same actions are applied everywhere. I remember watching. I mentioned him on the previous podcast, Stan Efferding. His wife, I forgot. I don't, not Haiti, but some other, I think some island in the Americas. And it was a very, when she was a child, so Stan Efferding's wife, when she was a child, basically they ate only the food that they could grow and they could kill. And obviously, obesity and diabetes was non-existent, obviously. But then, as soon as the capitalist market entered that region, McDonald's, fast food, processed sugars, everything kind of went, as you said, everything. People went from a point where they barely had any food to now having a ton of food. So obviously, what do you do in that situation? It's a normal reflex. You eat a lot of food because you never know if something will happen, and you're again going to be at that low level. So the population got severely obese in a very, very short amount of time. Diabetes skyrocketed. Basically, heart disease skyrocketed. It's kind of, it's interesting. It's almost like population control done on its own capacity. It's like we're almost designing our own population control. A lot of people like this idea of like we make fun of those people over here, like the
Bill Gates.
The Bill Gates, the 5G chip and the vaccines, kind of how population control. Well, we don't need a Bill Gates.
No,
we don't
we're
need.
Doing it to ourselves.
Exactly, we're killing ourselves to the capacity to which no other disease, fungus, pathogen has ever done so successfully as we have ourselves. And the way things are going, it's only going to speed up.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious because we're talking about nutrition. We're talking about, you know, what kind of food we're consuming, and I'm interested to know. I'm not going to say I'm a nutrition expert. You know, I've read books. I eat in a way that I've deemed to be quite healthy. And I'm curious, what do you think is the main driver for diabetes in the population? Because, you know, I'm not keto. I eat sugar. I eat honey. I eat potatoes. I eat all that stuff. But everything I eat is in a natural state. And a lot of people there's a lot of, you know, the scientist or evidence-based community saying, well, you can eat whatever you want. It's just when you're in a caloric surplus that it's bad for you. I'm like, dude, I eat in a caloric surplus every day. I'm trying to build muscle, but I don't understand how if you're eating whole foods and natural foods, it is so hard to get fat. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
There is never one answer to like this question because I'm going to touch on another subject later on, but chances are that you have to look at the entire picture from a macro perspective. So if you actually look into it, and I'm going to tie into I've mentioned this, I'm going to tie into this later, and that's something that I know people are going to want to hear, and that's the decline of testosterone levels. And pro tip, it's not the BPAs. It's not. So if you actually look at the human development, and you can actually track this from the 60s, ever since World War II ended in 1945. So after that, there was this huge economic boom, huge technological boom. Cities started expanding. Obviously, we had the baby boomers, so the entire population got severely went up, and that's usually something that happens after large catastrophes. This is something that's actually been proven. Every time there is a huge catastrophe in the sense of war, famine, plague, or anything like that, the population takes a dip and it rises up significantly. So that's exactly what happened after World War II. And interestingly, the levels were some the obesity rates, not obesity rates, but body mass index actually went up year by year after I think from the 1950s or something like that. So why are people getting fat? Is it because I'm going to first label a few common answers people give. Is it because of the processed food? Yes. Is it because of the increased caloric intake? Yes. Is it because of the access of refined foods? Yes. Number four, and something that a lot of people forget, is it because of the lack of physical activity? Yes. The reason why you cannot gain a lot of food is because of the aforementioned reason that you gave yourself, and that is you train your ass off in the gym. Although, and this is actually something interesting, I didn't know this, a friend of mine actually gave me that statistic. He told me in 2018, the fastest growing industry in the world, or one of the fastest growing industries in the world, was fitness. So definitely there is a popularization of training. We saw that with CrossFit. We saw that with a lot of different. It's very new age to go to the gym today. That's just a fact. I think there has never been so many people who've been training in the gym as there are now. But here is a catch. There has never been so many people that haven't been training or doing any sort of physical activity in I think in all of human history as there is now. Because look at this now. You have an Uber. If you want to go to a store nearby, you take your car, you take a motorcycle or something like that. People barely walk. Secondly, most people live in cities. It's not anymore that you live in a countryside or you have your own yard and you have your own farm where you're actually working in the field and actually using your own body. That doesn't really happen anymore. People live in their blocks. This is even a case in any bigger city. It's not just in the West. I mean, if you go to Belgrade, which is a population of something a bit less than 2 million people, if you walked into any neighborhood and asked them, hey, I want to go find an X place in the neighborhood. If you're in neighborhood A and I want to find an X place in neighborhood D, and you ask them, how do I get to that place? Most of them are going to be like, we don't know. Have you checked GPS? The reason is because people aren't moving anymore. And if they are, they're using fields of transportation that aren't their legs. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of factors. Definitely and this is something also I'm going to go in detail that a lot of people do not know. Definitely it's the processed food. It's definitely the increase in sugar. That's without a doubt. Thirdly, it's definitely the caloric intake, and fourth, the all overall lifestyle choices. Now, what do I say? The first thing, that's something that people don't really know. That you kind of mentioned that I've been eating these whole foods and I'm not getting fat, whereas someone is getting fat ridiculously fast just by eating junk food. Well, this isn't that. If someone actually invested a little bit of time in research, and even anecdotally, you don't have to read the literature, you can find this out for yourself. A calorie isn't a calorie. A carb isn't a carb. I know that if it fits your macros, people hate this whenever this is mentioned, but it's objectively not the same. 100 grams of carbs from something like what do people eat in the States? They eat what's the name of that? Those Pop-Tarts, yeah. 100 grams of carbs from Pop-Tarts and 100 grams of carbs from baked potatoes are never going to be the same. First of all, their glycemic index is completely different. The way they stress the pancreas is completely different. The release period is completely different. Everything functions completely differently. And not to mention, there is something that a lot of people don't know. It's kind of like this has been bodybuilding common sense for decades, and people are only discovering it now, and that is positive and negative partitioning foods. Certain food items will positively affect your body to the point where it will not store the said food as body fat, and certain negative partitioning foods will be primarily stored as body fat. That is objectively true. I always tell people who always tell me like, oh, a calorie is a calorie, and I tell them, okay, perfect. Eat 2,000 calories where you're eating 75% carbs and maybe, I don't know, 10, I don't know. So like, so that's 25% left. And 10% fat and 15% protein, and eat 2,000 calories where you're eating 40% carbs, maybe 40% protein and 20% fat. And you tell them your body composition won't change. Sure, you hypothetically will be identical on the scale, but look at yourself in the mirror. You're going to put on body fat. That's fundamentally how it works. And you're also going to lose muscle. It's one of the things even I do with a lot of my clients. A lot of the work I do, a lot of those transformations that I maintain, I don't put people in a caloric deficit. I basically I'll optimize their macronutrients. I optimize the sources of their macronutrients, and while people start losing fat, they start gaining muscle. And a lot of thing. One more thing that people tend to forget, I think, is the fact that there is a hormonal response to certain amounts of food that you eat. The obvious answer is insulin. So your pancreas is always going to release insulin in a different capacity depending on what you eat. This is, again, where the glycemic index comes into place, but a lot of other things. So you have that. But there are other things. It's been now shown that certain types of food can affect your thyroid. So obviously that we all know what the thyroid is used for. So obviously that isn't good. So you have all of these things. And again, it's like everyone wants a study nowadays. Everyone wants a study to confirm whatever bias they have.
Yeah, we can get into that.
Exactly. But I mean, like, this is something that even your grandmother knew. Mm-hmm. Like, if you ask your grandmother, like 80 years ago, or your great grandmother, 80 years ago, what will happen if she eats chocolate all day versus, I don't know, potatoes or grains or something like, or more like full wheat grains? Well, she's also going to say, well, kiddo, you're going to get fat. So, I mean, why is this all of a sudden such a taboo topic to say that certain types of food will get you fat easier than others? Obviously, if you're training, if you are doing things correctly for the rest of your day, you can blunt some of those effects, but it's going to eventually come true. And this is also, I recently watched the documentary. Was it on Vice? I forgot. But that's something that I never thought I would say again. But yeah, basically, Vice did a documentary on the sperm loss in men. So basically, there was like this astronomical drop in like 40% of sperm rate in like in the last 40 or 50 years or something like that. And this is something that we all know. Testosterone levels go down with the sperm count. That they go hand in hand. The less testosterone you have, generally speaking, the less sperm count you have. So they were kind of going into details what causes that and stuff like that. automatically, I knew this was going to happen. The number one thing they claimed was making people drop their T levels was the BPAs in the plastic and the chemicals that you find in everyday supplies. Now, again, coming back to that thing where what is causing the diabetes and obesity rates, is it the processed food? Yeah, sure, maybe a bit. But, people aren't going anywhere. So now also the same thing. Are BPAs the cause of 40% of testosterone in the last 40 years? Of course not. They're probably affecting people in what capacity we don't know, because there was never a study. There was never any research done on that topic in detail. But I mean, all of the things which are positive will positively affect your life. All the things that will negatively affect your life. People think that if you literally have zero physical exercise, how are you going to produce testosterone? I mean, testosterone gets produced as a response. It doesn't like the same way you don't rev your car into 2000 RPM when you're trying to start it. It's not going to happen. You up the RPM as you're trying to go over someone, not go over obviously, but pass someone or something like that. So there is a similar response in testosterone. If the body feels that it doesn't need that much testosterone, it's simply not going to produce it. If you don't train, if you eat like garbage, if you do all of that, of course it's going to drop your testosterone. I mean, this isn't rocket science. It's basic human, it's basic lifestyle choices that people make nowadays. And it isn't just testosterone. There are a lot of things that are going up, and people aren't looking into them. Estrogen levels are going up, and now what is actually very sneaky if you don't actually pay attention to it, and that is that the clinics are actually changing what is normal nowadays for estrogen levels. So they're increasing it, and they're lowering what is normal for testosterone. So one of the worst places that is currently being done is in Canada. I've heard that now the upper limit of testosterone in Canada is 750 nanograms per deciliter.
Mm-hmm.
That's the upper limit. Whereas in most places in Europe and in America, the cutoff is 950 nanograms per deciliter. So they cut it down significantly. Whereas estrogen is raised. Why? Because the average person now has less testosterone and more estrogen. This is similar thing is also happening with blood pressure.
They lower the bar of health rather than
exactly.
looking at it like an issue and trying to elevate people's health. That's such a problem.
Exactly. Same thing is happening with blood pressure. When I was going to school, we were told that the normal range for blood pressure was 125 over 75. That is the most you want it to be. Now they're actually saying, oh no, it's like 135 to 85. Well, no, that's borderline hyper. How do you call that in English?
Hypertension.
That's borderline hypertension. When at that level, the heart doesn't care about your feelings or your social scenario. It doesn't. 135 is going to be high blood pressure, and if you have high blood pressure for 10 years, it's gonna kill you sooner than if you had it 125. So now they're actually lowering it, well, actually increasing what is normal, because the average person cannot maintain a 125 over 75. That's how bad the state of health is nowadays.
That's what we're doing in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
The bar just keeps going down, 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 down. Yeah. Rather than people elevating and learning these things and overcoming. Man, I could talk about this for hours. We were talking about testosterone, and you don't think it is. Yeah. So say the BPAs are affecting us in some way, and there's definitely benefit to avoiding your exposure as much as possible if you can. Obviously, when it comes to chemicals and stuff like that, I don't think about them too much, because you could freak out over it, because fuck, man, everything is plastic. I'm touching that shit all day. I need to touch people to say receipts are estrogenic, but I need receipts. I need to write them off for my business. Like I need to live my life. Like I'm in this society. There's definitely forces at play that are going to be negative to my health. But if I'm eating right, I'm training, like I don't think I've actually never got my testosterone checked, but just anecdotally, I don't think I struggle with low testosterone. But it'd probably be worth me checking my testosterone. Now that I
checked it once. I checked it once. Yeah. It was the only kind of iffy thing was that they didn't use nanograms per deciliter. But I think the range for free T was anywhere from 2 to 8, and I was like 5.5, so normal. That was also free T and total T, so both were perfectly fine. But yeah, as you mentioned, like, I don't know if you remind me again, and maybe if you would want to answer this, but how old are you?
I'm 28.
So you're okay. So you are 28. So I'm turning 25 in October. So we could say I'm 24 now. So you're 4 years older than now. Do you remember maybe around 10 years ago when people were fearing that everything is carcinogenic? Everything. The sun is carcinogenic. Making pancakes is carcinogenic. Nutella is carcinogenic. What else?
Life is carcinogenic.
You remember this? You remember this? This was carcinogenic. You never want to have these radiating lights because they're gonna kill you in 10 years. It's like the same craze that's going now. It's like with people with BPA. Oh, I cannot touch plastic because it will level my T levels, or I cannot, I don't know, touch this fabric because they'll like, and it's supposedly from these like supposed strong people who are very strong and very aware that they're now afraid of everything. I mean, it's the same craze.
Yeah, there's a balance to be struck. It's these people that are too, I'm going to use my technology. I'm going to use my phone. I'm getting blue light right now through the however that affects me. I'll put on my blue blockers at night. I'll avoid certain things. I'm not gonna, if I can avoid drinking out of plastic, I will, but I'm not going to let that I have noticed that's a balance that needs to be struck. There's these people that are, everybody wants to call everybody a health freak if you just are mindful about your food. But
Yep.
there are genuine health
Yep.
freaks where they're scared, they're tiptoeing over everything. I can't eat that. Everything needs to be a certain way and blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, you just need to handle the basics and live your fucking life and eat well, train hard.
If you remember what I said previously, when you were doing all the things correctly, you can get away with certain things. Like if you have 4 meals a day, and this is something that I just told one of my clients, if you have 4 meals a day times 7 days, that's 28 meals a day, 28 meals a week. If one meal is off, that's not going to affect you in any significant way. So if you're doing everything correctly, if you're sleeping, first of all, if you're sleeping, I mean, there is we're talking about T levels and obesity rates, but people aren't even sleeping anymore. Basically, the average person is now sleeping 6.5 broken hours because they're waking up during the night and they cannot go to bed and they're going to in 3 a.m. and stuff like that. So if you're sleeping correctly, if you're eating, if you're training, if you're walking, people have no idea the benefits of walking. Just walk. And that can fix a lot of. You have a stiff lower back, walk. You have digestion problems, walk. Blood pressure, blood sugar is going up and down, walk. Those are all very basic solutions that can be fixed. And if you're doing all of that, you don't need to worry about the BPAs in receipts. You don't have to worry about the blue lights that are going to do something very bad. Obviously, as you said, you try to avoid certain things which are probably not good. I try to avoid plastics myself, first of all, because I don't like them. I don't like things which can be molded and broken and something like
that goes against your essence.
yeah. But I like when things are hard, no homo. But yeah, but as I mentioned, you avoid certain things which are that you can avoid, but you're not like one of those people who literally don't want to spend 10 minutes outside because they think the sun is going to kill them.
Yeah, which is just stupid for so many reasons. People wearing sunscreen in Canada. I don't know what the weather is like in your area, but it's summer here for 3 to 4 months, and then it's winter for the rest. And people will wear sunscreen religiously in Canada, like just lather it on. Everyone's always like, wear sunscreen. I never wear sunscreen. I have no skin problems. I just get a tan.
I mean, over here we have a continental climate, so that means summers are really hot and winters are really cold.
Yeah,
best of both worlds.
That's how it is here.
So I mean, I think again that's another thing that people are getting crazy about. Oh, should you wear sunscreen? Should you not wear sunscreen? Is the sun going to kill you? Is it not going to kill you? Again, common sense, common knowledge. Don't get fried in the sun for 8 hours. That will kill you. That will literally kill you. My friend almost was an example of that when he came from the UK. Yeah, he came from the UK where there was like 16 degrees Celsius, and he came to Serbia where it was 38.
38.
That's common over here. That's common over here.
That would be really, like, we get up there, but that would be a really hot day.
Over here, it easily can go up to 40 degrees. It's not that a problem. So he came from 16 to 38. We spent 4.5 hours directly under sunlight. So not a single shade not a single shade in miles, because we were shooting guns for 5 hours, and lo and behold, what happened? He got a heat stroke. It was really bad, really bad.
Was he puking?
Yeah, he did once, and he was also he had blood coming out of his nose. But the important thing was that he rested for a couple of hours. He slept for maybe 2 hours, and then we went to the gym and did deadlifts. So everything was fine.
I'm kind of curious what the culture is like in Serbia.
In what regards?
Have you ever been to the States or Canada?
No.
I'm just kind of curious, like, what are the people like? you talk about the downfall of Western culture. Is that happening where you're at?
Of course.
Yeah.
We're still we might be Serbs, but we're still humans.
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, like all things, in Serbia, over here, whatever is happening in the West over here is also going to happen, but it's just going to lag.
It's
But
gonna lag.
it's happening. Of course, you see it day after day. Obviously, certain things. The good thing is that we're able to see how certain things are developing in the West, so we can kind of have um, have our guards up,
Mhm.
so do not let it pass over here. That it's definitely a more, I hate using this word, but it's definitely a more traditional country.
A little, a
You
little,
don't.
a little more
Yeah,
conservative.
again, over here we would say it's common sense, it's common knowledge, it's nothing
Yeah.
extreme. But I guess because the pendulum has shifted so much on the other side, I guess even being normal is now considered too conservative. But yeah, I mean, over here it's we we still value things that we think are important. It's I wouldn't. It's one of the things that I have obviously a lot of friends from, well, also from the States, but especially from different parts of Europe. And every time they come here, they're always pleasantly surprised about a lot of things, especially because of everything that was going on in the 90s. There was this bad depiction of the entire region, to be fair, not just Serbia, of how bad it is. And then when people come over here, crime rate is low, people are happy. There you don't have no-go zones. It's
Yeah,
like,
you hear about those no-go zones in some European
yeah,
countries, and
yeah.
it's like, who knows if that's real or not? I guess you would know some of those.
Well, definitely there are places where you don't want to go. Yeah.
Mhm.
I was never, for instance, obviously North Scandinavia is supposedly where it's the worst. I was in Germany, and I was in Germany in when was it at? So now it's 2021. 20, I forgot, was it 2016 or 2015 or something like that? When, if you remember, in Cologne there were 1,000 rapes.
Oh yeah, dude.
I was in Germany at that for that New Year's Eve. I was
That
in, and
was in
also,
that was in one night, man.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
god.
one night.
That's
So yeah,
crazy.
it's definitely. I mean, you would never hear that happening over here. I mean, obviously, it's the population is like 7 million, so rapes happen. Of course,
Mhm.
it's something that's going to happen. But case in point, we are so much backwards that we had a case 4 years ago where some lunatic raped a young girl and killed her. And the public was, and he went in hiding. And the public was so outraged, there were actual lynch mobs trying
Oh,
to find him.
good, man.
There were lynch mobs trying to find him. Thankfully for him, the special forces managed to find. Actually, though, like the military was involved in everything. It was kind of a scandal for multiple reasons, but the military actually found him first, and that changed the cultural landscape so much that the law was changed to reenact life in prison for people who commit those types of crimes.
Yeah.
So it's definitely well, for instance, I heard of, like, stories in Sweden. I don't know if this is true,
Yeah. Fair enough.
but I can see how that can be a possibility. I mean, for instance, disabled woman was raped in Sweden, and then I don't know if she was killed or not. I think she was just raped. She was raped in Sweden, and when protesters, and I think the people who were involved in the crime were giving up some silly fines, like they paid some money and they were basically allowed free.
Fucked.
And there were like protesters who protested, like, how are you letting rapists gang raped a disabled woman free? And the media actually said that the Nazis were protesting. So we're so backwards that we put rapists in jail for life, but
Mhm.
the progressive,
Yeah.
the woke Europe, woke West is letting rapists walk free.
Yeah, the reason I was curious about Serbia culture is it sounds like you guys still value masculinity. You still value virtue and more traditional ways of living. If you come over to Canada, it is so hard to find people like like-minded men. Canada has been one of the worst countries for the COVID lockdown, to the point where my brother moved. I'm in Alberta, and right next to Alberta is BC, another province. And my brother moved there. And starting September 13th, they're enacting medical segregation. So if you do not have a COVID vaccine, you cannot go to a gym, you cannot go to a restaurant. You need to have like an app on your phone that gets scanned.
That's
like,
not happening everywhere.
It's starting to happen, eh?
Yeah. It's case in point. It's been happening in Italy for some time, and I know there are protests everywhere. For instance, I just have a client of mine who, I mean, he wants to start with me, and one of the problems that he now has is he cannot enter a gym. He cannot enter a gym. He has to like forge a document, and we just said like, okay, you're training at home. What can we do? But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're gonna see how far this goes. I'm kind of the belief that if people allow this to happen, it should happen. If people are gonna just bow their heads down, I mean, take it. I mean, we had a interesting situation over here. Serbia had a very we tend to believe that we had a very strict lockdown because we actually had a curfew. So the curfew was so hardcore at one point. It lasted like for entire weeks. But at one point, the curfew actually lasted for, I think, 72 hours, meaning in 72 hours, you were not allowed to get out of your home at all. Like you were allowed just to go to a hospital if something really, really bad was happening. Or actually, no, you weren't allowed to go to a hospital, but only if like you were dying and someone called the ambulance, they had to come to you. So it was that bad. So, and we were kind of this idea that, okay, we just have to do this for some time. We just have to do this for some time. And then a week, and then another week, and then another week, and then another week. So what ended up happening was during last summer, basically all restrictions were let loose, or most of them. And all of a sudden, we're going to come into Serbian politics now. The guy who's in charge of the country, he organized an election. Obviously, he won because, of course, he did. And while the voting was happening, there were no restrictions, simply because he needed to get the votes. Now, as soon as the votes actually, the election finished, literally days after it finished, he said, "Oh, we're having a huge spike in cases. We're putting the country back in curfew." And you know what happened? The worst riots in 11 years. Belgrade was burning because people were not going to take it. They were like riots for 3 days. The first day was the most chaotic because people actually entered the parliament. They wanted to burn it to the ground. They were chasing. There were some politicians who tried to take over the protests, and they got a beating because people they don't want to see any politician anymore. And you know what happened? 3 days after that, the government said no lockdown.
Boom. That's the thing. And we were talking about being sick of talking about this situation. I'm so sick of talking about COVID. I'm sick of politics. I just want to do my shit. I want to focus on develop myself. But it's getting to the point where now it's hindering my self-development. You know, I need to go. I want to go to the gym. I don't have equipment at home. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on not being too consumed by the fear porn and the constant bombardment of, you know, oh, they're going to do this and this and communism and the great reset. And, you know, people like, especially in our space, a lot of people love to just throw that shit out there. And I have, trust me, because it's something that's starting to hinder my life. And I'm curious, what do you think is the balance between being aware of these great cultural shifts and external enemies, but also focusing on yourself? Like what do you do in your personal life?
I think it's an important thing to structure your life in such a capacity to where you're going to be as prepared as you can to withstand anything that might happen. Now, how is that done? Well, first and foremost, I think one of the best ways of doing that is for having financial independence. I mean, if you work for someone, and I know this is a difficult thing to say, but if you work for, I mean, we're all dependent on our money from one way or another.
No,
Yeah,
We're all dependent in some way, shape, or form on the system.
exactly. I mean, I'm dependent on my clients. I'm dependent on sales, but I don't have a boss. But you want to be the lead. The minimum, you want to have the minimum dependence on anything that you cannot control. So if you can somehow make your own money, if you can even save money, so if something happens, you're like, okay, we can take this.
Mhm.
I mean, I was kind of when this entire situation, when the first lockdowns happened, and I heard the amount of businesses that went out of business in just like a month of a lockdown. Like I can understand if you have a multi-billion-dollar corporation, so like every day you lose literally millions. But if you have a small business, how do you not have savings for like 6 months?
Yeah, cash reservoir.
How do you not have that?
Cash reservoir.
Exactly. I mean, cash reservoir. Like have physical cash somewhere, because if something happens, you want to be prepared for that. You want to be prepared in any other capacity. If things start escalating,
Mhm.
can you protect yourself? Can you protect the people who are with you? Those are the things that you can do. And I think we'd all eventually get trapped into this in some point, like this fear porn and stuff like that. Oh, the man is gonna come to get you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna do my thing, and I'm gonna do my thing to be the worst possible target that someone can try to come to.
Boom. Yeah, that's the way. That's a good mindset.
And if that happens, I'm gonna do my best to basically get out of that situation as best as I can. And if not, I didn't. At least I was prepared, or at least I was trying to be prepared. But I think this idea of like, oh, what is? I mean, case in point, when things started shutting down over here, uh, we were looking at things before actually the first lockdowns happened in Serbia. A friend of mine and me, we were looking at the lockdowns that were first happening in Italy, in the UK, Germany, and we saw cases starting to come up in Serbia. And we were like, it's only a matter of time before they lock everything here. And now because we are our what should I say, we're your friendly meatheads. We cannot live without the gym. So we're like, okay, we have to set up a gym in like days. In literal days, we have to set up a gym because it's only going to be a matter of time before they close it. So I remember we were talking, and me and a buddy, and that buddy were like friends for like almost 10 years. So we don't have to talk about things all that much. We just say, okay, it has to be done. It will be done. Boom, end of discussion. So what ended up happening was we spoke to a couple of friends of ours, and we were in the gym. I can remember that day like it was yesterday. I mean, it was only like a year and a half or something like that, so it wasn't that long. So we was talking to a friend of mine. I say, do you realize, because we were in the gym, it's only a matter of weeks before they close this, or a matter of days? He said, nah, you're overthinking it. It's not going to happen. I told him, I told him, like, in a matter of days, you'll be out of the gym and you'll be losing your mind. You're going to see it. No, you're overthinking it. The next day, me and my friend, we drove 300 kilometers. Oh, no, wait, I drove 300 kilometers. He went to another place to pick up some other things. We set up a complete gym in 3 days. Power rack, barbells, plates, everything in 3 days. In 6 days, everything was closed. Everything.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. You have to be prepared and see how the tides are turning when things go bad. If I was in Canada and I don't plan on getting vaccinated, and the gym is something that I found really important, find a way. It's something that I tell some of my friends, some of my clients. Oh, they won't allow me to enter the gym. They won't allow me to do this. It's like
it's an excuse. It's an excuse not to do anything.
I try not to swear, because I think cussing can be beneficial to prove a point and to highlight something and to highlight the situation. But and I also try to be as polite as I can with my clients, because you want to be as professional as you can. But I was always to the point where I wanted to say, motherfucker, you haven't been doing anything for a year. What do you expect was going to happen? Like, for a year, he was telling me that, oh, they aren't going to do anything. They aren't going to do anything. His 4-week lockdown lasted 9 months. And he's now telling me, oh, I cannot enter a gym because they're gonna ask for a green passport. Like, what were you doing all of this time? Like, if you if you saw the tides are turning in such a direction where your position in a gym will be limited, then either A, get vaccinated and stop complaining, B, set up a gym. And if you cannot set up a gym, find a friend and set up a gym. And if you cannot do anything of that, don't complain. Like, don't complain. I don't want to hear it, because it's been all of these like empty talk, or like, oh, I cannot do this, I cannot do that, like I don't have time, I don't do it. I don't care. Find a way. Because inevitably, because I don't say this to be an asshole, but I'm telling you, find a way, because you will benefit the most out of it. Complaining about it won't get you anywhere. It's simple as that.
If this situation that's transpired over the last 18 months, if that hasn't shown you the value of being a sovereign individual, whether that be financially, physically, all of these facets of life. When I actually started this podcast and I started my page and sharing my ideas after the lockdown, I lost my job. I lost my job 3 times in like a few months. I'd get a job, then they lock down again. I'd get us locked down. I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I started a business with my brother, and we don't rely on anybody. It's just me and him. So I don't need the government's handouts.
Yeah.
So we have that, you know, they're financially, I'm sovereign. And then it was, okay, well, they're closing down the gyms. Like, I need to get a little bit of equipment. And obviously I like going to the gym, but if they locked it down tomorrow, I'm not going to stop training just because I don't have access. It's like, dude, there are people who have taken this as an excuse to stay at home, watch Netflix, eat shit. And then there's the people that have like started entrepreneurial ventures. They've, you know, started podcasts. They've worked on their online business even harder because they know that that's what's going to keep them free.
It's like one of those things that I wrote some time ago, and that is, this COVID situation is inevitably going to prove, because eventually this COVID situation will end. Now, how will it end? We don't know. But it will end. They cannot spin this idea that this virus is killing us over and over again forever. Eventually, it will end, and it will either turn into a police state, or even a bigger one than it is now, or it will shift into something completely different. And when the curtains are down, we will know exactly
how people are spending their time.
Not just how they're spending their time, but what did they do in 2 years, or to be precise, what didn't they do? I kind of want to everything that I do, I view it from a mythological aspect, or at least I wanted to make it as if I'm living in a movie. And when this entire situation came out, originally beginning of last year, and when we were setting up this gym and everything like that, I mentioned to you previously that we had that stringent lockdown, curfew, and everything that went along with that. Well, actually, for as long as that curfew lasted, I physically could not go to the gym that we set up, because I didn't have time, because the lockdown would last from not lockdown, but the curfew would last like something ridiculous, to the point where I either had to train at like 6 a.m. or there were no options at all, and I could not train 6 a.m. because I was working late at night, so there was no option. So what I do, and I live in this isn't a big apartment, it's like 70 square meters. So I live in like a 70 square meter apartment, but that still didn't prevent me from training. I used the bar that I got. I had 70 kilos of weights, so that's 160 pounds. So I had 160 pounds of plates, dip station, a chin-up bar, and that's how I trained for 3 months, I think. No, I'm lying. I think that's how I trained for 2 months. And the reason why I say I want to view my life as if I'm in a movie, I kind of view it as like, okay, now imagine if I went to prison. Now, how would I come out of prison?
Yeah.
will I come out with bitch tits and a gut?
Yeah.
Or will I come out jacked, blasted, and the 9 yards? And it's kind of like it's interesting, because and I really went into that role wholeheartedly. I trained like a lunatic because I couldn't box, so I just trained like a lunatic for 2.5 hours, destroying my body. And lo and behold, the best I ever looked was when the curfew ended and I went into the gym. That's where all of those I like to believe, my best photos where I'm having this gigantic beard and where I'm shredded to the
Just
bone.
pumped up.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I actually got even leaner. I got leaner without basically getting out of my apartment. I trained with like a barbell and not a barbell, but like the adjustable bar, adjustable dumbbells, with like 70 kilos worth of plates, and I came out better. So inevitably, how will people come out of this entire COVID situation? We will either know, they will either come out as victims, they will either come out as the need for the
Victors.
government. Yeah,
Victors or victims.
exactly. Exactly. So we're going to know that very, very soon. And I think we already have a general idea of the big picture.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to know, how long have you been training other people? Like, how long have you been training clients? And how long were you training before you started to share that with other people?
I think I actually found that photo just a few days ago. I document my training from before my first powerlifting competition, because I used to go to the gym, but it was really nothing spectacular. I just went a couple of times a week. It was completely sporadic. There was no time, no planning, no anything like that. And I had a huge break periods of like 6 months because I had some throat infection and I couldn't train or whatever. So the first time I actually started seriously training, and I that's the cutout point where I actually started squatting and deadlifting. It was summer of 2014. So that was when I actually started squatting and deadlifting. And in September 2014, I entered my first powerlifting competition. So that's kind of, you can say, from 2014 I started training. Now, I started coaching people in 2018, I think, officially. And the reason for that was, again, kind of ties into what we spoke about originally, kind of understanding that the tides are turning. I was kind of working at this job for a US company where I was doing I was a work order coordinator, whatever that means. But yeah, I was basically doing some email work, customer support, stuff like that. And I realized that job is on thin ice, because it was only a matter of time when the company will go down. And I realized I had to make a living outside of that. And an interesting thing that happened was I realized that I could not go to a gym, or at least a gym that I trained in, without, I'm not even joking, spending at least 30 minutes in that gym helping people with their squat, with their deadlift, with their bench. Because if you remembered from the original conversation, and for the people that don't know, I mentioned previously that everything that happens in the world, it eventually comes to Serbia, but it's lagging. So all of the information that we had about training was from the 80s, and from the bad 80s. So when the people's idea of training was bro splits, extremely high intensity, high volume, no bending, no heavy weights, no deadlifts, no anything like that, because quote unquote that will get you crippled, and you don't want to do that because that's going to lead you into a wheelchair. Whereas me and my buddy we were getting educated online, obviously learning stuff like that. So we found out, you have
a little bit ahead of the curve. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were squatting, bench, and deadlifting and stuff like that. And there was a point where, and I mentioned this in the previous conversation, that it was extremely discouraging, because anyone who's ever walked to a gym, and let's say you're training for like 5 or 6 years, and unless someone actually helped you, how difficult was it for you yourself to learn how to squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead press? Now,
really difficult.
Exactly. Now, add on top of that, people literally, and I'm not even joking, telling you, you will end up in a wheelchair doing that. So it was extremely discouraging. And it's not because they were malicious, but they didn't know. They literally thought if you pick something off the ground that is heavy, they thought like a 100 kilo deadlift was something that's going to damage your spine forever. As Mike Tyson would say, my spine is broken. No, my back is broken. But yeah, so they didn't even know. And lo and behold, a couple of years later, we're getting results. We're not crippled. We're not in a wheelchair. Our deadlifts are improving. And now they're looking at this like, hey, these deadlifts, they look cool. You pick shit off the ground, and then you yell if you feel like it. So, and then I came to the point where I couldn't walk into the gym and do my own workout without, hey, can you look over my deadlift? Hey, can you show me how to squat? Or, hey, I'm having knee problems when I squat, or my shoulder is bothering me when I bench. So I realized if that is the case, then how many people are out there who were experiencing the same thing, and why don't I charge it?
Yeah.
And that's eventually how it all started.
Absolutely. What do you think are some of the biggest, what are some of your biggest pet peeves when it comes to fitness? Misinformation or things that people preach that you think are out to lunch? I'm kind of curious.
Thankfully, I think, or at least I hope, that the things we now consider common knowledge are becoming really common knowledge. So things that you have to use the compound lifts and when you're starting off and things like that. I think that's good. One of the things that I really started disliking recently, and that is the scientific approach to training. That's something, and not just to training, but to nutrition in general.
This is actually something I want to get into. This is a nuanced conversation to be had.
Actually, for me, it isn't nuanced, because everything, if you, obviously I've been doing this for some time, so now I've kind of seen the trends. And one of the things that there's an interesting trend that if something is going to happen in the terms of physical performance or human involvement physically, it will the first place it will happen will be bodybuilding. Why? Because they're always pushing the boundaries of human development. So the entire idea of like looking at training and nutrition from this like scientific approach is nothing new to bodybuilding. Did everyone know that? Because there was always some guy with a pencil and a notebook, and he's like, no, the science says that you only have to perform reps at RP 7.7. and this like giant bodybuilder dude was like dwarfing him. Was like, okay,
okay, bro.
Yeah, okay. So it was always, that was always the case. I mean, that isn't anything new, but I see it definitely being popularized now, especially with nutrition. And it's for the people who don't know how to read it, it can come it's very difficult to disprove. The reason why I say this is you probably heard of the documentary Game Changers, right?
Yeah, garbage documentary.
Why is it garbage? Because if you know anything about research, you know they made every single they made every manipulative tactic that they could to get you on their side. Why is that? For the people who are unfamiliar, Game Changers is a Netflix?
Yeah, Netflix documentary. Yeah,
it's a Netflix documentary on why veganism is the best thing ever for sport performance and stuff like that. So I everything that I'm going to say here is not me making it up. It's actually in the documentary. One thing, when you're first, it's important to understand when our research is a study is done. First of all, not all studies are good studies. You want to a good study is a double-blind, placebo-controlled study with a lot of individuals, and where hopefully you have the minimum amount of variables possible. Now, as you can imagine that is very difficult to achieve. So what do people do? They cherry pick studies, and they do very vague studies that can with a million amount of variables, and they come to a conclusion, and they say, and this is the typical, how do you call that, cause and effect situation.
Cause or correlation.
It was a cause or effect or something like that. I think something like that. The point is, let me give you an example. I'm drinking water. In X amount of time, I will die. Therefore, water killed me. Why? Yeah. Because I drank water and water killed me. Now,
that's cause or correlation.
Yeah, okay, cause and correlation. So basically, we can now extrapolate that everyone who ever drinks water will die.
Yeah.
Therefore, water will kill you. Now, that is exactly how these people do their research. There was like a segment where they said, oh, Roman gladiators ate a vegan or vegetarian diet, and they were athletes. First of all, that they weren't athletes. No, they were they were basically freak show fights that the Romans watched for fun. Second of all, they weren't a privileged class of citizens, they were slaves. We all know the Spartacus rebellion and why that happened. So it's not like they were like some super mutant NFL players who were just jacked out of their gills and ate broccoli. I mean, that wasn't the case. They were slaves and they were fed slave food. Now, obviously, if you invested a lot of in your slave, you could have given him some better stuff. But generally speaking, you don't invest a lot in your slave because chances are he can die and you can lose your money. So, and not to mention, and this is a cause and correlation, a perfect example. Gladiators ate vegan diets, therefore gladiators were supreme athletes. Therefore, if you want to be a supreme athlete, you have to eat a vegan diet. Okay, let's look at it from another example. Basketball players. Let's dig up the bones of all basketball players. Now, if we dig up the bones of all basketball players, we're gonna come to a conclusion. They are all very tall. Okay, so what do all of these people have in common? They dribble the ball and they hoop it over the net. So, conclusion, we have very tall basketball players. They are all very tall. Therefore, if you want to be very tall, you have to play basketball. Does anyone believe in that?
No.
There was also this, and I hate this example. They took blood work from a vegan and they took blood work from a meat eater, and then supposedly the meat eater's blood work was worse compared to the vegan. Now, if you follow my original
that doesn't mean anything.
That doesn't mean anything because there are a ton of variables. First of all, what does quantify a meat eater? Is a meat eater someone who eats McDonald's?
Yeah.
Is he also a person who drinks beer on the weekend? Is he also a person who doesn't work out? Well, that can be a meat eater. And what do we know about vegans? Extremely health conscious. Most of them work out at least something, and they have healthy habits. So you already have a group of people who are more health conscious versus a population who isn't health conscious. Now, if you want to make that study more accurate, okay, you take a group of vegans and maybe they work out and they have good habits. Now take the exact same habits from other people, but just who eat meat. But maybe their meat is chicken breast, maybe white fish, maybe salmon, maybe they eat eggs. So let's find the difference between those two groups of people, but not you take the best cherry-picked example from one side and the absolute worst from another, and like lo and behold, the side which was more health conscious ended up being better. I mean, there are millions of these like cherry-picked, or like the example of like certain MMA fighters, Nate Diaz included, are vegans. Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor. Therefore, veganism is the best solution for fighters.
That's interesting. That's interesting you bring that up, because we live in an age where science is more religious than anything.
Exactly.
It's like scientists can do no wrong. Scientists are people. There are tons of bad studies, and the fact that everyone needs some kind of study. You know, I can show you a study. I'm drinking coffee right now. I can give you a study that coffee's going to kill me. It's going to put me in an early grave. It's going to give me all types of mental health problems. I can also show you a study that tells me it's going to benefit me and lower my dementia and Alzheimer's risk, etc. It's fuck, man. People need to learn how to filter out information, be able to, you know, I'm not saying there's anything wrong. I like science. I like reading studies, but it's like, if you're a person who's genuinely interested in a topic, and you know how to discern scientific information and studies, and you know a bad study from a good study. But we have a population that is so gullible, and so if there's just, you know, that's another thing that's been happening over hashtag follow the experts, hashtag follow the science. It's like, bro, scientists fuck up all the time.
Yep.
You know,
and it's not like any branch of science is canon. It's not like it's fixed, it never moves. It's all of those are theories and hypotheses. So very few, I mean, there are some talks now that they will disprove Einstein's theory of relativity, because supposedly black holes completely and obviously I'm not a physicist, so I can be talking something that's completely
just an example.
yeah, exactly. But basically, black holes defy all of those laws. So therefore, the law doesn't apply in that field. So now it's interesting because you went in a very interesting comparison, and that is that science and researchers and stuff like that, it's basically the new religion of the West, which is very interesting. And if you are an avid Nietzsche reader like I am, this is nothing out of the realm of possibility, because the famous God is dead and we have killed him perfectly applies in this context, because humans in general are creatures of the mind, body, and soul. Now, this tends to be a little bit. I hate hocus pocus magic. Like, I believe this energy and now we're gonna heal everything. No, I don't believe in that. But I believe that people feel better when they have when they believe in a higher entity, whatever that is, God, universe, whatever. It's a very, for most people to believe in nothing is a very, it's not a very how should I say,
fulfilling life.
Yeah, it's not a very
satisfying.
It's not at all.
Another way that you could phrase that is there's not many people on this earth that are true atheists.
Exactly.
Everyone has a God of some kind. Exactly. And now that God value is being placed on science, or you could say scientism.
Yeah. It's perfectly applicable, because as you mentioned, now the new God is not a Christian God, it's not a Jewish God, it's not an Islamic God, unless you're a part of a different demographic. But Western, or to be precise, Caucasians or Westerners in general, believe in the God of science. And God forbid, see what I did there? God forbid you question the God of science, because lo and behold, the mob is going to come after you and they're going to burn you at the stake. The only difference is this stake isn't in the center of town where someone is literally having a torch and putting it on branches or leaves or whatever and setting you on fire. They're now setting you on fire
online.
Maybe yeah, but the outcome is completely the same, because when they were setting out, when they were burning witches, and the Spanish Inquisition was having people trialed for witchcraft, heresy, and whatever, the end goal was death. So now, when people try to cancel you nowadays, what is the first thing they do? They call your boss. Hey, this guy has questionable views. You should fire him. What is the end result of that? The end result of you getting fired is you not having money. Therefore, you cannot supply yourself. Therefore, you cannot live. Now, the other way of doing that is they dox you. So what is the point of doxing? So they know where you live. They know whatever. So hopefully someone who has a bigger testicular fortitude than the person who doxed you is going to come at you and do physical harm. Again, the Inquisition just doesn't have a big ass cross over here, and they're not saying Deus Vult or in the name of God or something like that. No. They're saying
follow the science.
Exactly. They say follow the science, but meanwhile, that exact science.
Trust the science. It's like trusting God.
Trusting God.
That is such a ridiculous statement to say trust the science. Science is they're always trying to poke at something and figure out why it's wrong. Scientists don't trust science.
Exactly.
Everything is just a theory. That's why I don't know. Yeah, I could go into that for hours.
No, it is true, as you mentioned, trust the science. And it's like how dare you not trust it? How dare you not believe in God? Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. It's always funny. These people who are always acting like this are always drowning in their own hypocrisy, because God forbid you actually say that you believe in God. Mm-hmm. It's like there's this interesting shift in Serbia, because there was this an entire fiasco where there was this we have a liturgy. Obviously, Serbia is an Orthodox Christian country, so our mass is a liturgy or something like that. I'm not really religious. So basically, one of the things that they do is in this ritual, they take something on a spoon and they eat it. Now, here's a big problem. You share the spoon. You share the spoon potentially with 100 people. Now, you can see it's almost like if you look at it from a macro perspective, it's a religious war, because at one side you have this camp who is Orthodox Christian and who believe God will protect them from COVID, which actually wasn't the case, because a lot of priests sadly died because of COVID, because they absolutely had zero they had zero measures to enact. They were literally doing everything together in like the worst possible time, and like a lot of these people like in their late 80s. So like you're asking for it, and whereas you have this camp where it's like, oh, the Church of Science, and like our church says that your church is invalid because your God won't protect you from the illness, but our God will protect you from the illness. So it became this huge religious war, and there were actually some people who said like, no, God is going to protect our ritual. But then you see these people who are supposedly anti-mass gatherings and anti being confined in a closed environment with a lot of people. Then Black Friday came and everyone was like this. So you see the hypocrisy, because they're all drowning in their own hypocrisy. They're always trying to virtue signal the other side while they're doing the complete
morally outdo each other.
Exactly. Well, they're doing the exact same thing.
And I love that how, there's not a lot of middle ground anymore. It's either you're over here or you're over here. You're either a quack, anti-science, anti-vaxxer, God forbid, which is just a whole other fucking thing. Meanwhile, there's the people over here that are like fucking religious about the vaccines.
Yeah.
Like, man, there's people in the middle that are scientists that are questioning how we're doing things. But everything is so polarized, and everyone's straw manning each other's opinions.
I mean, when it comes to this entire situation, I think I always said, personally for me, I don't. It's very weird how we live in an age where your medical history and medical not choices, but basically your medical state is left to the state and society to dictate what you can do with it. Like in the AIDS epidemic, no one was going out and having people draw their blood and see if they're HIV positive. What was that? That was discrimination. In a lot of, and before anyone tells me, yes, HIV is an infectious disease, and it actually can kill you rather easily. But no one was doing that in the 70s or 80s. It wasn't the case. Now we have our medical history and our medical state left to the state and the system to decide what we're going to do with it. I always tell people, listen, I have nothing against the vaccine if people want to get vaccinated. It's the same thing as the guy who's on, I don't know, God forbid, has cancer, and he has a choice whether to do chemotherapy or not. Mm-hmm. Dude, it's your choice.
100%, yeah.
It's your choice. Who am I to tell you that you shouldn't or shouldn't do it? I have a buddy, shout out to Burns from Texas, but basically I have a buddy who had a tumor on his brain, and it was malignant, and he basically made a choice. You're going to cut that out and take it out of me, and I'm not doing chemotherapy, and if I survive, I survive, and if I don't, I don't. And the doctor was like, there was a very small chance that you might survive. He said, okay, let's do it. Let's take that chance. They had a surgery. They removed it. Part of it remains, but it's not spreading. He never got chemotherapy, but that was his choice. Not a single doctor told him, but you have to take chemotherapy. Like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. The same thing is about the vaccine. There are definitely some people who should have, not only do I don't care because it's not related to me, but there are definitely some people who should take it. Mm-hmm. Like if you're like in your late 50s and you're obese and you have diabetes and a myriad of things, take the vaccine. It's even if it does give you Bell's palsy, even if it does give you a blood clot, there's a bigger chance of COVID doing a worse thing to you. You should.
we've always, as a free society, allowed people to make their own risk analysis. Why are we now why is the state now telling us what amount of risk we're allowed to take on? You know, and the whole idea of people who, I agree with you, I'm pro-choice about the vaccine. I'm not going to shame people. Like I'll post funny memes about it and stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like, if you want to get the vaccine, get the vaccine. If I don't want to get it, I'm not going to get it. That's freedom. That's just, and if you believe in your vaccine protecting you, you shouldn't be worried about me.
Exactly.
Right? Is your strategy that every single human being on planet Earth needs to be vaccinated in order for you to feel safe? Because that's fucking ridiculous.
To be fair, I can say from my own personal example, I think around 40 or 50% of the country over here got vaccinated.
Yeah.
So and it was a lot of those Chinese Sinopharm or Sinovac vaccines. So it's not a messenger RNA. I think that those were the least utilized. So the Pfizer, Moderna was, I think, never even offered over here. So we have the Pfizer, we have the Russian Sputnik, we have the British AstraZeneca, and we have the what's the name of it? The Chinese vaccine. So most of the people actually got vaccinated with the Chinese one because it's the most primitive way of making vaccine. You basically take an inactivated virus and you just shove it in your body, and your body makes antibodies, whatever. Yeah. That's how the most amount of people actually get vaccinated. Believe it or not, and I think this is also something the media is to blame, obviously, but the people who are falling for this are even bigger idiots, because most people who I know who are vaccinated, I didn't know they were vaccinated until that came up at some point. They weren't the people who were raging about how you need a vaccine. They weren't the people making petitions. They weren't even people who were up for discrimination on vaccinated and non-vaccinated people. They're just people like, hey, I don't want to get sick. That's simply it. I don't want to get sick. I took a chance because I believe in my head that there is a bigger chance of having something bad happen to me because of getting COVID than being vaccinated. That's perfectly fine. And those people are not the ones parading how the people who are not vaccinated are morally inferior in some capacity. So I think that's definitely the media to blame for doing that. So
absolutely.
It's like, again, do your own thing. And if anyone believes, it's like, I saw that thing it's like absolutely glorious. It's like, you can either know history or you can trust the government, but you cannot have both. So anytime the government is going to interfere and say, you need to do something or X.
Yeah. Well, a bunch of people are just going to double down and resist it even more.
That's my point exactly. If I was someone in the government and my goal was to get the most amount of people vaccinated as I humanly can, the last thing I would do is turn all of those conspiracy theories into truth.
Yeah.
The last thing I would do is segregate the vaccinated and unvaccinated. The last thing I would do is make it compulsory. The last thing that I would do is basically enact fines for people who are not vaccinated. Like, listen, if you honestly believe that your solution is awesome, have people on both sides. And if your solution is so better than the people who are against the vaccination, you're just naturally going to win in a debate. Mm-hmm. You're just going to convince people. And there is no reason to do this harshly and brutally, because every time you say, oh, this is mandatory, this is compulsory, you cannot go in a gym because you're not vaccinated, you're basically saying, oh, okay, so all of those conspiracy theories are now true. Yeah. Therefore, there is definitely now something wrong with this vaccine. So they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a strange time, man. People don't, and there's a lot of censorship going on that is making people even more suspect. I don't talk about the vaccine because if I talk about the vaccine, I'm going to lose my account.
No, don't do it. Yeah. I don't know if I don't know if you saw it. I don't talk about it. First of all, I don't care about it. Second of all, it's like, if you make a living in any capacity in social media, even if it's not direct, but it's indirectly, and you're talking and you're poking the bear, you're literally an idiot. Because there are ways where you can do that without being so risky. I mean,
well, even that post that I made, it was just like a satire.
Yeah.
And it was poking the bear, but it was like, it was kind of like, I didn't mention COVID. I didn't mention vaccines. I'm just talking about a fit passport, man. Like, you can kind of get away with stuff like that. You can kind of just gently poke,
Gently, yeah.
Yeah, you got to kind of strike a balance, because I noticed I would talk about certain things and my engagement would drop for a couple of weeks, and I'd be like,
Exactly.
It caused a correlation, whether that was just people didn't find my content interesting, but it always seemed to be when I poked the bear a little bit, my algorithm would kind of
exactly.
Yeah, who knows, man. Before we end, I do want to get into we're going to talk about training a little bit. What would you say to people who are beginning their training journey, people that are just getting into the gym? What are your training philosophies, and so we'll talk about training, we'll talk about your thoughts on nutrition, and what you think are kind of what you think is the holy grail of physical training.
Okay, so for the first thing you want to do is hire a coach. No, I'm joking. The first thing you want to do is not do too much. It's very easy to bite more than you can chew, because people, and I always say this, some people, some of my ex-clients might get a little bit offended because of this, but I had a lot of influx from clients who were like, this dive bomb, let's do it, let's change my body composition, let's build a ton of muscle, let's get a 500-pound deadlift. And that enthusiasm lasts for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then it's like just going down there. So first of all, you have to be realistic. Now, this is not to say that you should have low expectations, or should you aim to achieve to pick some low-hanging fruit. It's not from that. You should have a grand goal. A grand goal, it can be anything from looking like The Rock to losing 100 pounds. It doesn't matter. That's your grand goal, but you have to be realistic with the steps you approach. Now, it's like any new habit you're trying to form. If you are a person who wakes up at 10 a.m. every day, you don't want to try to wake up at 6 a.m. That's not going to work. Wake up at 9, 8:30. See how that feels. Work it in. So just take it easy. I always tell people, like, if you're an amateur, breathing the air that's in the gym will get you jacked. You don't need to do a lot. So take your time. 2-3 times a week is more than you need for the first year. And just familiarize yourself with the compounds. Learn how to squat, learn how to bench, deadlift. Mm-hmm. And this is a very important thing. You do not, and you won't learn it very fast, but that's fine. Even not learning it will change your body for the better. Mm-hmm. You will lose fat just by trying to lift a barbell, because it's still more of a stress adaptation reflex than what you were doing previously, because before you weren't lifting a barbell, and now you are lifting a barbell. Now it might be empty, but that's one barbell more than you ever lifted in your life. So take it easy. Don't approach the gym in like this capacity of like things are going to go down in 3 weeks. That isn't going to be realistic. And something that also is bugging me, because obviously I coach people for a living, and outside of another thing now that I do, but it's like the people aren't. It's the one thing that really bugs me is the people who have no capacity to endure anything. I get people every day, like not every day, but let's say at least once a week, who say it's ridiculous, because they write this long essay how their life is a mess and this and that. And some people might laugh at that. In the beginning, it was kind of weird for me, but then I realized people are opening up to me because they have no one to tell this to. And then they're like, yeah, I want to change my body, and I'm willing to be devoted 3 months. Like, dude, like, what can you do in 3 months? Can you save $100 in 3 months? I mean, this idea that people are not willing to do the bare minimum to endure. I mean, and this also idea that I never understood this. You get asked for someone to coach you, and you don't want to either A, listen to them, or B, you take offense to when someone says, so listen, dude, like if you have 100 pounds to lose, you have 100 pounds to lose. There is no sugarcoating about that. That's a good amount of weight that you have to lose. So now you have these dudes who are like, and I always find it funny because they're always the dudes who have something Viking on their Instagram, and they have runes, and they usually have this patchy beard, coming from Mr. Patchy Beard, and they have this patchy beard and a big ass gut, and they're mean mugging everyone and stuff like that. And then they got super offended when you tell them, hey, listen, you have to watch that video that I sent you. You cannot just wing it. Like, so trust the process. And it's something that I always tell people. Even if today sucked and you went to the gym, it is still better than the day you didn't went to the gym. Mm-hmm. So it's always like, it might take a bit longer, but every day you complete your part for that day, that is one day less that you have to do it. It's really like that. Don't bite more than you can chew. Enjoy the process. Don't be too amped about it. Don't think things can change. I would say, if your body composition is a result of 6 months of Doritos, Netflix, and couch, don't expect for that to change in a month.
Yeah.
You need to invest a directly proportional amount of time to in the gym to the time that you invested in getting fat.
Absolutely. People don't understand that. They see this, it's a 30-day transformation. It's like, dude, I don't change much in 30 days. For me personally, I'm 28 and I'm thinking about where I'm going to be at when I'm 35. And that's a long time. That's 7 years of training. Like a lot can transform in that time, but I'll enjoy seeing myself progress. Sometimes when I'm in the shower and I'm like scrubbing my body, I'm like, ooh, my lats feel a little bit bigger. Nice. And you're checking yourself out and you're noticing the micro changes. Yeah. And if you're looking at photos from a year ago and you look at a photo today, you'll notice physical changes, but it's not, the biggest thing is embodying or creating a lifestyle around changing your body. That's the only way it works. It needs to be a newfound way of living. It can't just be a short-term burnout of 30 days where you're just going to feel like shit and you're going to feel like working out doesn't even work. Of course it doesn't work. Nothing works in 30 days.
Exactly. No. I gave the example of like people expect like a 3-month program, but like no one gets not offended, but no one questions why they cannot buy a house in 2 years working a minimum wage job.
Yeah.
Like no one does that because you have some expectations. If you're going to build if you're going to buy a house, it's going to require a lot of financial firepower. Therefore, you need to make that financial firepower anywhere. But all of a sudden, people think that they can look like Brad Pitt and Troy or The Rock in what was it? Not Hercules. Whatever. You want to look like The Rock in 3 months. Like no, it doesn't work like that. And this idea that people, it's like that, I want it now, and if I cannot have it now, I don't want to have it ever. So I have these people who are like always wanting to change things and always wanting to do this and that. Like, dude, like just focus on the basic stuff. Don't overthink it. Just don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's easy to, when I first started training, I can understand that mindset. But the more you train, the more you get humbled and you realize that this is a long-term grind. This is not something that's going to manifest in a short period of time.
That is true. But also, a lot of people are also ungrateful because, as I mentioned, you spent 6 months getting fat by sitting on your couch, eating Doritos and watching Netflix. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, the body works in a magnificent way because the body works under responses. And it responds to stress, it responds to adaptation, it responds to comfort and stuff like that. So if you had no stress, now if you had no physical exertion in 6 months because you spent it on your couch eating Doritos, anything that you do will cause an adaptation for your body to get better. So you might not lose 100 pounds in like the first, 2 months, But you might lose in the first 2 months, you might lose 15 pounds. And that's 15 pounds better than what you were 2 months ago. So be a little humble. Don't be that person who wants it all the same second. Like 15 pounds is excellent progress. Like, dude, everyone is going to say you look better. Like I tell people, one of the most, how should I say, vague reasons why I never stopped lifting weights was I looked horrible before I lifted weights. So after I started lifting weights, after like 6 months, I look slightly better. So like, why would I want to look horrible if I can look slightly better?
Yeah.
So it's really that simple. It's like the person who's like, who would decline? Let's say you have a job, and let's say the job is okay, and all of a sudden, but let's give a number. Let's say you're paid $2,000, but the job is okay. It's nothing too extreme. Now you would ideally want a $4,000 a month job, but now your boss tells you, hey, you're doing an excellent job. I'm going to raise it by $800. So now you're paid $2,800. Who's going to say no? But the people are going to lose 10 pounds and say, nah, this isn't for me.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. The same amount of energy and time people put into, like going to school, getting a really good career, you need to put that amount of energy into building and maintaining a good body.
And truth be told, most people don't even need to do that. Truth be told, most people don't even need to do that, because you have to understand your goals and my goals are probably Frank Zane, Mike Menzer.
I want to get as much as I can out of it.
Exactly. Our goal is to basically get as much as we can out of it. Most people want to look good for a wedding. Mm-hmm. Most people want to fit in their favorite pair of jeans.
They just want to be healthy too.
I think that's indirectly because most people are not interested in health. They're interested in the vague reasons. But if health will come with the vague reasons. But that's what I'm saying. You don't need to change your life completely if you want to fit in a pair of jeans. If you are 250 pounds and you've never lifted a weight in your life, it won't take a lot of work for you to lose 50 pounds. It really won't. Mm-hmm. So it's not even that hard. It's not even that, but people are conditioned to not like anything that requires work. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Because we live in an age where you get everything off of a one click. So you want anything, you order it from Amazon. You don't even go anymore to a restaurant. You order food to your house. This is especially the case in COVID times. You don't do anything anymore. You don't even see friends. You view them over the camera. Now, this isn't like something like that we are doing. We're literally in a different time zone, like different parts of the globe. But that's what I'm saying. People are not interested in investing zero amount of effort in anything, and yet they expect the most amount of return from nothing. Yeah. So it's a complete oxymoron, but it is what it is.
And as you being a coach, what do you do to kind of help people over that hurdle, or do you just kind of fucking let them go at that point?
I have to, first of all, from a business aspect, you cannot tell people to go. That would be financial suicide. But second reason, I can understand what people mean. I can understand getting into something for the first time. Case in point, today I had my first Muay Thai session. I've been training boxing for 2 years, and I wanted to go into Muay Thai and whatever. And today was my first session. It went okay, actually. It went fairly fine, but I am expecting to have my hips and my feet sore by the next day. That is how it's going to work. So I can position myself in such a capacity to where I understand the guy who is new to all of this. And I generally, if anyone who's been ever coached by me, this is something they can testify. I really, and this is something probably everyone says, but I really give it my all to have the client as a smooth process as he can. So I have phone calls, videos, I explain everything, I write paragraphs of text, and I make it super simple. So you don't have to overthink. So a lot of people, they have this they're new to this, so they don't know what to expect. And that's perfectly fine. No one is born knowledgeable about every single topic. So as long as you're willing to put in the work to understand and to not question everything. I'm fine with questioning, but straight up rejecting to do something because guy on the internet
Yeah.
said it. I
Yeah.
mean, you have no idea how many times I had to combat this idea that X new trend that is popping up. A guy a guy who was into, like, you have to be realistic, because one guy who said he wanted to lose 100 pounds, and now all of a sudden he said, I want to do tire flips and Atlas stone throws. Meanwhile, he has what's the name of it? He has a lumbar hernia. Like, what are you expecting? Like, you want to lose 100 pounds, you want to flip tires, and you have a hernia. But no. But that guy on the internet said this is an excellent way to condition. Like, dude, you can barely squat to depth. Like just trust the process. I mean, it's fine for you to ask me why are we doing the things we're doing. I have a complete PDF where I explain everything.
Yeah.
But just trust the process. I mean, it's not that difficult. It really isn't.
Yeah, I want to ask you some questions. I guess selfish questions, things that I'm going through right now. So when I first started training, I did a lot of stupid shit. I was doing a lot of, like, quote unquote functional training, kettlebells and all that bullshit, which sure that can have its place or whatever. Now I moved to, the barbell lifts. I was doing deadlift, squats, bench, barbell rows, and I did master the form on those. Like I spent hours and hours and hours, years really perfecting my squat, deadlift, and stuff like that. And then eventually I started discovering I liked certain movements. It felt better to me. So say, instead of, like, I rarely ever do barbell bench. And for someone like you who's very focused on strength, your bio says strength and hypertrophy coach.
Yeah.
And there's now a big distinction between strength training and hypertrophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, as someone, I would say that my focus currently is I still value strength. So when I do, I'm kind of, sometimes I overthink this, but the balance between strength and hypertrophy training. I mean, if I'm doing I do incline dumbbell press, bench press. And every time I'm trying to put more weight or more rep, I'm training harder every time. I'm getting stronger in that lift, but I'm doing it in the 8 to 12 rep range rather than the, barbell bench where I'm doing 1 to 3 reps or 1 to 5 reps. What is the biggest difference between strength and hypertrophy training? Mm-hmm. And do you think that the two are things that most people need to train both of? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
I think a lot of people overthink this currently. I overthink it.
Okay, so here is the catch. When you're new to the gym, again, your body works to respond to stress. So if you never benched before or something like that, or let's say you never did an incline dumbbell bench press, due to that stress scenario, your body is naturally going to get you bigger and stronger. That's just naturally how it is. Now, at a certain point, you can be inclined more to one thing or another. That always happens. And here is the difference. First of all, strength is partly something that is developed, but also it's something that is learned and skilled. Why do I say this? A large part, and this is something that anyone who's been ever coaching people in powerlifting, you also have this in bodybuilding, obviously, but in powerlifting, it's a completely different thing, and that is peaking. So basically, let's say you have a block, a 4-week block where is a hypertrophy block, and you're doing like 5 sets of 10, 5 sets of 15, and stuff like that. And that is basically to get your body accumulated to a ton of volume. Then you maybe deload, and then you do another block where you're training in the 8s. So that is, you're slowly lowering the reps, but you're increasing the weight, and like that until you finally reach a point where you're hitting singles, triples, and stuff like that. Why is that? Your body naturally gets better in doing things that it already is familiar with doing. Now, if you're doing a ton of 15 reps sets, that is something that you will be very, very accustomed to. Now, in general, most people will say, well, if you can do, let's give an example. if you can do, let's say, a bench press for 225 pounds for 5 reps, most people would say that the amount of force that you exerted to get those 5 reps would equate that you can probably get 250, 260 for a single, because 250 or 260 for a single requires the same amount of force that you produce for those 5 reps. Now, here is the catch. The more the reps get higher, the more that gap is expanded, because your body, because there is also a neuromuscular adaptation that comes to performing certain amounts of reps. If you perform 15, and especially if you ever did like a high rep squats, you would notice one thing that's actually becomes very interesting, and that is your legs don't give out, but your lungs do.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who ever did that, it's an incredible feeling.
Absolutely. Been there.
Your lungs feel it, and your core feels it, your feet feel it. I'm telling people, like, when you do a set of Widowmaker squats, your feet are hurting. So that would equate to your 1 rep max being higher. But oftentimes this isn't the case. This isn't why I believe in calculators so much, because there is a lot of unpredictability. And the more you do singles, the more you do triples, the more your central nervous system gets adapted to handling that heavy weight. Because a lot of the heavy weight adaptation comes from your neuromuscular coordination and neuromuscular adaptation, but it also CNS, but also your emotional relation to for that weight. So you eventually get more facilitated in those sets and reps, so you naturally become better at singles or triples and stuff like that. I had people who could squat 315. I'm not joking this. So I had people who could squat 315 for a single, but they couldn't do 240 for 4 reps. No. They just couldn't do it. There was like, because there is also muscular endurance, and some people just don't have that at all. They can, and this is
different pathways. It's different,
yeah. And also, if you look at the body, and this is something that I covered in detail, you have the fast twitch and the slow twitch muscle fibers. Some people are just not they're just not used to using the slow twitch muscle fibers. So those are the endurance based ones. Those are the ones that get taxed with really high reps. The fast twitch muscle fibers are singles, doubles, triples, stuff that gets really gets up and down really fast. So that's something that you that also plays a huge factor. So to answer your question, is strength and hypertrophy something that can be separated? Yes, it can. It's an undoubtable thing. I mean, my 1 rep maxes haven't improved significantly in a very long period of time. I've only my bench, my squat, I squatted 180 kilos, so that's 405. Last time, no, for the first time 2 years ago. 2 years after, I squatted 190 kilos, so that is 420 pounds or 425 or something like that. Yeah. So it's a 10 kilo difference in 2 years, but the difference in my legs is ginormous, because again, there is also strength specific activity. So the same, basically, again, your body gets accustomed to what you're doing the most. Now, will you get stronger if you do more reps? Yes. But is that strength going to mean strength on a 1 rep max? Now that depends. Mm-hmm. So that is where the difference. That is why every coach, every powerlifting peaking program has a point where you're doing very high reps, medium reps, low reps, singles, because it has to get you accustomed. Because hypothetically speaking, if they could just ramp the reps and keep the weight the same, your 1 rep max would just go up naturally. But it doesn't happen like that. You have to peak for it.
You brought up something cool too. You were talking about when you were squatting, your cardiovascular system gives out before your legs do.
Yeah.
That's, talking about the stimulus to fatigue ratio for bodybuilders. It's more of a, you want the actual target muscle to be the thing that goes first.
Yeah.
So even for me, I haven't really been doing back squats recently. I've been doing, really heavy or really intense hack squat sessions or leg press, because that just decimates my quads compared to barbell back squat, which is more of a, like, you're not going to, if someone's testing their strength, you're not going to put them on the leg press. You're going to put them on the back squat. back squat. So yeah, for me, I've been training mostly hypertrophy, but I've been getting stronger too. And I'm wondering, I have been over the last little while, even watching your posts, like seeing you do heavy deads and heavy squats. I'm like, damn, maybe I should add that in.
It's not something, again, it's the style that I coach people. I get people jacked through getting them stronger.
Yeah,
that's just how I do it. It's my preferred way of doing it. I think it's the most beneficial, but that isn't the only route to that end goal. There are multiple ways, and you gave a perfect example of like the hack squat. Yeah, the hack squat will definitely put more size on your quads, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Now, that is because, and this is something that a lot of people like to point out when doing the compounds, and it's when you tell them like, okay, now say that carefully one more time and do it slowly, and now answer your own question. And that is, a lot of people say there are these stabilizer muscles that get activated on the compounds, and the reason why that they're so great for hypertrophy. Yes, there are stabilizer muscles in the compounds. When you bench, you want to have a really big upper back, and you want to have a tight upper back, because that's going to make you stable on the platform, without a doubt. But check this out. What happens if you are even more stable? So hypothetically speaking, you can engage the muscle that you want to engage even more. And the only time that is going to happen on machines. So my simple solution: do both. Yeah. It's going to benefit. Well, personally, I don't do machines because I don't have access to them anymore. I train in a dungeon. But generally,
if you had access to a hack squat, leg press, chest fly,
absolutely, without doubt. Yeah. I mean, I still do that when I'm in a public gym. I utilize that. One of the gnarliest pumps that I've ever got in my life, not in my life, but not pumps, but soreness, was doing hack squats on a Smith machine while I was on my vacation, because there was no squat rack. So we loaded 70 kilos. And again, that's like 160 pounds. Yeah. I loaded 100, and mind you, I squatted 190 kilos for a single. My 10 rep max was 150 kilos on a barbell squat. So that's 330 pounds for 10 reps. And now I'm doing 160 pounds on a Smith machine hack squat. So legs forward. I did it for sets of 12 to 15. My legs were sore for 9 days. I could not walk. Yeah. That's what I'm saying, because there is no stabilizing. The machine stabilizes it for you. So now all of the weight is going on the quads. They cannot avoid it. So there is no, like with nutrition, there is no, well, mostly there is no good and bad food. There is no good and bad exercises. Most of them do a really good job. Dorian Yates, look at him. He barbell rode, and he did the pullovers with a ton of weight. Biggest back in bodybuilding. Ronnie Coleman, he squatted a ton. Did you look at his leg press? Like, did people forget? The people who say that he squatted 800 pounds in a suit twice, did they look at his leg press? That's what I'm saying. Do both.
Yeah. Don't be dogmatic. That's when people get held back. And like, and we're talking about adherence earlier, and people not wanting to endure. Do the stuff you like doing. You know, if you prefer doing, a certain kind of movement, do that. As long as you're they're obviously, like, you want to be training the movements. You want to like hinges and squats and push, press, all that stuff. But if you prefer dumbbells to barbells, then use dumbbells. Do something, like whatever you enjoy doing. Obviously, there's benefit to a wide range of training styles, but do what you enjoy. That's important too.
To be fair, there are some exercises that I don't enjoy at all, but I do them because I know they will benefit me. Bulgarian split squats come into show.
Oh God!
Horrible, absolutely horrible exercise. One of the worst that
I. Not enjoyable at all.
No, not at all. But especially like the day after, when you get sore in places that you really didn't want to get sore. But hey, it's an excellent way of keeping your knees and your lower back healthy. So, and as a person who deadlifts reasonably heavy, at least for me, I want to have a healthy lower back and healthy knees, and also the person who squats. So that's why I do them. I think they're beneficial. I hate them. I don't enjoy them at all. But the rest of my training I enjoy. Obviously, there are a couple of more exercises, but you get the point.
Before we end today, there's one other question I wanted to ask you is, as you become more experienced and you're more self-aware about your body and how your body feels during training, you start to be aware of where your limits are. And I've been really trying to up the intensity. The last 6 months, my training has been extremely intense, according to me. And what I wanted to ask is, a lot of people don't really understand where true muscular failure is. They mistake muscular failure for mental failure. To use that for example, every leg day for the last, every time I train my legs, I get sore because I push so hard. And I take it to the point where I'm like, dude, I'm literally like grunting involuntary, like, not, it's not even like I need to like get in my zone. And I'm like, every rep is painful. And it's been making a huge difference. Like I've noticed like big size increase in just like a few months. And I'm kind of curious, in your experience, we're training on your own and with clients, what do you think, like, how do we understand, or what's like a way we can train with intensity and know we're actually pushing it?
That's a tricky one because a lot of it is experience. Newer lifters don't know that because this is something that I tell my clients all the time, and that is, a basic client doesn't differentiate between heavy and heavy. They think, I tell people, it has to be heavy. You're lifting weights, but that is not heavy. So a perfect example, we obviously can quantify what is heavy based on percentages. So obviously, if you have, let's say, a 225 bench, that is 100% your 1 rep max. Now, if we take it 75%, that is obviously heavy, but it's not like 100%. So a client, someone who's new to this, doesn't obviously understand it. Not to mention, there is multiple types of failure. You can have eccentric and concentric failure. So for instance, let's say you're on a bench press, and the part where the part, let's say the chest, when you press it up, that is where the chest shortens. So that is that positive failure. So maybe you cannot press it anymore, but maybe you can lower it more where the muscle lengthens. So now obviously you cannot do that alone. You have to have a friend who's going to spot you all the way. But that's what I'm saying. There are multiple types of failure. How should I, to be fair, in my own personal experience, I think there are definitely people who fall into, it's like almost like a vertically divided plane, because some people who absolutely don't touch anything near failure, like literally have 6 more reps in them. And you have people who go beyond failure to the point where literally they're swinging everything up, right? So it's a really weird plane where you kind of have to.
Yeah, well, I don't sacrifice technique.
Well, that's you.
Yeah.
But there are people who don't know that. So best thing I can advise to people is use machines for that. I don't advise, honestly, hitting failure on compounds. I think that's ridiculous.
Not when you got a barbell on your back.
No. It's not. It's not even. It's not only that it's not a smart idea for the sake of injuries, but it's not a smart idea for strength progression. I mean, most programs advise leaving a rep or 2 in the tank. Or maybe on a very specific set, you're supposed to go all out. But it's not something, I go out when I'm doing sets of 15. But when I'm doing a set of 5, I'm not going to failure. No way. Like, unless it's a very specific set where that is a requirement, I'm not doing that. Pick a machine. For instance, chest press, machine chest press. Perfect exercise where you can go to failure, because you cannot blow out your shoulder if you're doing everything correctly. Nothing is going to happen even if you fail. So those are the exercises where you want to go through pain, experience, and you have nothing to worry about.
Absolutely, man. Wicked. Well, that's a good place to end, buddy. If you can just let people know where they can find you online and talk a little bit about your coaching service, if people are interested in that.
Yeah, so you can obviously find me in where I'm most prominent, and that is on Instagram. So that is Warboss AOC. So Warboss AOC, that's where you can find me the most. Obviously, I also have a website. So that is Anabolic outlawcoaching.com. Again, you can just Google it. That is it now regarding my coaching. It's kind of like an online coaching service that I offer for anyone who's interested in bettering their physical composition, so in getting stronger, so losing body weight, building muscle, getting stronger. I generally, and this is something that a lot of people don't actually know, but the amount of work that I do is with people who are very new to training. So it's not people who are squatting 400 pounds. That's not my demographic. It's the people who are new to all of this, or maybe just have a year or two of experience, and now they want to take it to the next level. So that's what I do. My goal is to get, how should I say, to make this into a very easy lifestyle that people can actually adhere to, that it's enjoyable, that it's perfectly fine. And along with that, I mentioned previously, I offer phone calls, stuff like, I don't charge anything extra. I don't charge a phone call extra. I don't charge an explanation extra. We use a messaging platform. It's not 2007. We don't use emails for communication. So it's like a constant feedback, pretty much on a daily level. And I try to not break people's bank. So it's the full package coaching is, I think, less than $100. So, or just around that, and you get nutrition, workout videos, messaging, stuff like that. So obviously that's for anyone who wants to change their physical and probably mental and spiritual existence for the better.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for hosting me in our time, Damien. It was excellent.